Welcome to today's Community IT Innovators webinar series, Smart Data Backups, and I'll be your presenter, Matthew Eshleman. Before we get started, I just want to talk a little bit about Community IT. We've been a partner with nonprofits to help them in their strategic and day-to-day IT challenges, and we've worked with over 900 nonprofits since 1993 with a team of over 40 staff who are empowered to make informed IT choices. Community IT strives to serve the nonprofit community and resolve challenging IT issues with a range of support services from strategic IT planning to complete outsourced managed help desk services. My name is Matthew Eshleman and I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Community IT. Recently celebrated my 12th year at the company and have really enjoyed my time at Community IT working with a range of clients in a number of different settings, from day-to-day support to the strategic technology planning work that I do now. My contact information is here. Please feel free to send me an email, give me a call, or follow me on Twitter. All my contact information is there. And I'll also be at the N10 presentation in April and would love to connect with you if you're able to make it to that. Today we'll be talking about backups, and we'll start off by defining some terms, and then I have a few stories that I can share that I think help to illustrate the issues that we find in talking about backups, how to define an effective backup strategy that communicate those concepts pretty well. After we hear the stories about some lessons learned, then we'll look at ways to develop a backup strategy, some tools that we've put together to help organizations go through that process, and then we'll end with our approach to backups, how we incorporate some of the tools and the processes, and then match that up with some technology solutions. So thank you for your attendance today, and I hope this is a meaningful presentation for you. As always, please feel free to chat in your questions, and then we'll also be doing some polls along the way. So we want this to be an interactive experience, so please make sure to ask any questions, and I'll do my best to answer them as I go along, and then I'll also have some Q&A time at the end. Great, so let's get started talking about a couple of these terms. So disaster recovery, which is effectively asking that question from can my organization recover from the loss of information? We often think of the the fire and flood, and what happens when the server crashes. How can I get access to that information? How can I restore it quickly and get back to work? Business continuity deals more with can your organization continue to operate if those IT systems are unavailable? And that's there's a fire in the office, perhaps there's a flood and it knocks out all the IT systems, or even more dramatic, we've got some serious storms that knock out power, fry some electronics. So there's lots of things that can disrupt access to your IT systems, and so business continuity is the series of tasks related to making sure your organization can continue to operate in the event that for some reason your primary data systems are unavailable. Important topic that goes along with the business continuity heading is that asking the question of how long can we be down. That's often answered in terms of hours, potentially days. How long can your organization for example, be without email? How long could your organization continue to do your programmatic work, your advocacy work without those tools? Your fundraising database, your accounting system, your grants management application, your case management system. How long could your organization continue to function without those systems in place? And then disaster recovery is how quickly can we restore information and access once the threat has passed or once the critical event has occurred, once that server has crashed, how long is it going to take to recover that information from tape or from disk or download it and restore it back onto those systems to give staff access to the IT systems that they need to do their jobs. And another topic that often gets rolled into this is just the concept of data retention. So, not only do we need to plan for, which data do we need to back up, how can we make sure that we can restore it quickly, or how can we make sure that that data is available in another location so that we can continue to operate if our primary location is unavailable. But then also, how far do we need to go back? So if the perhaps the retention period for accounting is forever, how does that impact your overall backup and business continuity planning system if one of the events you want to protect against is a pipe breaking in the server room and flooding your server room? So if the backup plan is to have a backup system in the server room, and maybe you're making copies or you have tapes that are sitting there as well, that may impact your ability to fulfill that data retention requirement if everything is all in the same place. So, typically we see email retention periods of about a year. Some organizations will say, hey, after 30 days we're going to purge everything. Other organizations will say, no, we need to keep it longer. A year is a fairly standard practice that we see with the organizations that we work with. Files often need to be retained for much longer. So, so for a 7-year period, so perhaps those annual archive tapes or disks or online vaults say, okay, we need to preserve this point in time for a period of 7 years. After that, we can feel okay about purging that information or purging that system. And then, like I said, financial information is typically forever. The accountants don't like to ever get rid of anything, and so that can introduce some challenges, particularly if you have data in an accounting system that is no longer supported. An accounting system that's been end of life. How can you preserve the data that's in those systems? Maybe you keep an offline copy of the server. Maybe you export everything to PDF and save it that way. But these are some of the things that typically go into your backup and backup disaster recovery and data retention plan. So there's a couple of metrics that often get thrown around whenever you're talking about building these plans. So the recovery point objective, or it's often shortened as RPO, is the point in time from which data can be restored. So basically you're going to ask the question, how much data can I afford to lose? So, for transactional systems, could you lose 4 hours worth of data entry? Could you lose 8 hours worth of data entry? Typically, most standard backup solutions are going to be about a 24-hour RPO, and that means, essentially, backup is happening once a day, at night. And so, you're backing up data, at 11 or 12 at night that was entered throughout the day. So if your server crashes at 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock, then you're going to lose that whole day's worth of data. So that recovery point objective is a good metric to help build some of these conversations so that you can start putting some real terms and kind of business decisions around your disaster recovery plan, more than just talking about the technology involved to make these things work. Along with RPO is the RTO, or recovery time objective, and that refers to how long can my data be unavailable. So whereas with recovery point, we're saying, okay, most organizations will have a backup that runs once a day, and so that gives you a recovery point objective of about 24 hours. And in terms of recovery time, for backup to disk or backup to tape, you could restore a single file. Maybe it takes you 15, 20 minutes, very quick. But if an entire server is corrupt, or you have to rebuild an entire system or a large volume of data, then you're looking at 1 day, 3 days, 5 days for that recovery time objective, depending on how your system is designed. So, but that's a good number to help build some conversations around for your executives or your board to say, here's our scenario, here's where we're at with our business continuity and our backup system. And then we're not done with terminology. So uptime often gets thrown into the mix. So the expectation of access, you often hear 5 nines of availability. I think this translates into something like 8 minutes of downtime throughout a year. What's most common with a lot of cloud services, so Google Apps, Office 365, would be 3 nines, so 99.9% uptime. That translates roughly into about 8 hours of unanticipated downtime throughout a year. So often that's very good, and that's the industry standard typically for a lot of hosted services, cloud services, is that 3 nines of availability. 99% uptime. Then you start getting down into a few days. If you did a critical assessment of your own internal infrastructure right now, most organizations are designed around a 98% uptime, which means that you could have about a week of downtime, and that's kind of the expectation for the system. So if you have a tape backup or disk backup in your office, you're in a good scenario, you're looking at about a week of downtime if you have a major server failure. And again, retention, how is that data retained over time? How frequently does it get changed? And then finally, starting to look, I guess, larger enterprises, that concept of geo-redundancy. It could be as simple as you don't store your backups in your server room, you take them off-site, you put them in a safety deposit box. With some cloud services, the Amazon cloud being kind of the most famous, just because you put your data in the cloud doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be always available no matter where you are, kind of like Gmail, but a lot of cloud services, they have one data center, or you're in one region, and you can build that scalability, or you can build that geographic redundancy by using a different data center across the U.S. or across the world, but that may not be included by default. So it's good to look into those parameters, or those that language in the contracts. Where's your data center? Is it replicated anywhere else? What's the process if the primary data center goes down? So going back to this business continuity, my organization can continue to function in the event of a disaster. Often the fire and brimstone, or the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that often gets talked about in these situations is, what happens if there's a fire? There's an earthquake. You've got a flood. There's rioting if you live in downtown D.C. Maybe the protesters go crazy. There's some kind of sabotage or hacking. Very dramatic kind of concepts. I think it serves a point, and then it gets people's attention. But what we found in our experience in working with a lot of different organizations, over a long period of time. We've been in business for 20 years now. The things that often impact organizations and their ability to continue to operate, are much less dramatic. It's a power outage. The Pepco transformer blows, and then it takes a couple of days for that to get fixed. The internet outage. The backhoe for the street construction takes out the internet access to your building. Simple carelessness. Maybe the IT guy, slips and deletes a folder, or makes a wrong update on a server. A staff person, accidentally deletes a mailbox as opposed to just a message. Hardware failure. That's probably the most common thing that we see. the server, hard drive fails, motherboard failure, and often, that's on a system that's older, that maybe is not under warranty anymore, and that can really impact an organization's to continue to work if the system that they use for their files has a hardware failure, and it takes a day or two to get the part, and maybe it's not the right part the first time, so they have to go through it again. It can be a significant impact to an organization. Again, improper training, a lot of things that aren't very attention grabbing or very flashy, often have the most likely to actually cause an impact. And so I think it's good to prepare for what happens if there's a fire in the building, or what happens if we have a flood. There's some kind of civil unrest or martial law. How can we continue to operate? The things that are most likely going to happen is the power's going to go out, your internet's going to get disrupted, the server's going to crash. Those are the things that are most likely to happen. And so whenever you're doing your planning, you can kind of align the plan around what's most likely to happen, and then build processes and systems in place around that.
Building and a few surrounding office buildings, and so their building was without power for about 3 days, and during that time they couldn't do any work at all because all their IT resources were in their server room, in their office, that was without power. So even though they had very a solid setup, they had redundant internet connection, and they had battery backups, and they were doing a lot of things right. The fact is that the simple act of it wasn't a flood, it wasn't a tornado, but it was a lack of power, basically knocked them out for 3 days. Very soon after that, our contact got back to us and said, hey, our board came and said, we can't have you be unavailable for 3 days, so we need to make improvements that can increase our uptime. So, so in that case, it's good that maybe you yourself have one set of expectations, but if we can frame things in a way that make it easier to communicate to people in the leadership, or perhaps even your board, to say, this is what our current backup and business continuity system look like. Is that going to be good enough for us? And I think saying oh, we can be without email for a day is one thing. Actually being without email for a day is another. So I think the lessons learned in this scenario is when you can ask the board, get other people involved and really test that hypothesis. Can we be down for a day? That's what about 60% of people said. Yeah, we could be down for a day. Only 10% said they could be down for 4 days. So if you have an email system in your office, the reality is that you could be down for 4 days if something happened on your network. So let's move on to looking at the question of the cloud, and is it actually backed up? Again, another good case study. I think the cloud is obviously very popular. It's becoming more and more widespread. I think some of the security concerns and privacy concerns have really lessened in the recent past, and I think the capability and features have improved a lot as well. So we worked with an organization that was using Google Apps for their primarily for their organization's email. It's a very popular solution. It's free for nonprofits. So that has a lot of fans, and it's a really robust platform. It's highly available. There have been a couple of Gmail outages, but they're very few and far between. It's much better than anything you could design for yourself. But we had a situation where one of our clients came to us and said, "Hey, we let this person go on Friday, and we need to get into their email because they had some important interaction and important files. So can you get it back for us?" Well, just because you're using Gmail and you've got great uptime doesn't mean that you can actually back up and recover that data. So in Google Apps, once information is permanently deleted, it's gone. So in that case, they kind of done some good things in terms of moving to Google Apps, but there was that extra layer of backup and recoverability that Google Apps just doesn't provide out of the box. And so if somebody permanently deletes something, whether intentionally or inadvertently, the fact is that that information is no longer available within the Google Apps system. So you can't recover somebody's emails if they're permanently deleted, or you can't recover somebody's documents if they're permanently deleted. That's a good thing to be aware of as people use more and more cloud systems, kind of making sure that what are the recovery points and recovery times that you're going to get from those providers. If you're using Salesforce, how often is that data backed up? Is it backed up automatically? Is it something you need to do manually? What are those parameters that you need to think about? And then the other concept is that the retention period may not meet your business requirements. So, for example, Office 365 has a 14-day kind of deleted item retention period. So it means if you delete something in Office 365, then it goes into a a deleted item folder that's available for 14 days. But then after that period, it's gone. So if something happens, you empty your deleted items folder, and 15 days later, you're like, oh, I needed that email. It's going to be gone for good. So, and that may not be a big deal, and that may be an acceptable risk to take. But I think it highlights the importance of understanding what a system is going to provide and putting some numbers around that, and that can help you make the decision for adding additional services that may help you meet those requirements. And then the final story that I'll share is is one where there wasn't necessarily anything wrong with the technical solution that was provided, but it was actually a lack of training that really impacted this organization. So we were talking with I was talking with a colleague of mine, and they were relating a story where an organization that they had been a part of had made a switch to a relatively well-known managed service provider. They'd done a big network upgrade. They moved all of the servers from their site, in their office, into their provider's data center, where it was redundant power supplies and air conditioning and multiple internet connections and very robust system. So they did all this work. They had this big migration. They felt like they're in a lot better place. But then the person at the organization, they'd done this big project. They needed a vacation, and so they took their vacation. And as it turned out, the next day the internet failed, or there was some technical problem, and their connection back to the data center was broken. And so nobody in the office could do any work because they couldn't get connected to their IT resources. And so they didn't have the contact information for the right people at the vendor, and they hadn't been trained to say, oh, well, if there's ever a problem here at your office, well, you can just go to a coffee shop, and here's the remote access information, so you could continue to work. And so in that case, the organization was effectively down for a period of 3 days over a long weekend because they didn't have the contact information or the access, to get to the system that they'd spent a lot of money on migrating to. So, I think with all of these, there's lots of technical issues that can be addressed and identified, and really fantastic technology solutions that can be implemented to give great backups and redundant systems and high availability. But when it really comes down to it, the people component and the training aspect of all these solutions is very important. So it's great to have a fancy technical solution, but if nobody knows how to use it or how to work with it, it just doesn't do very much good. So again, the lessons learned, hey, a system's great, but people need to know how to use it. And then, also, it's important to have these plans written down and available in multiple locations. So I'm sure the vendor's contact information was located on the file server, but since they couldn't get to the file server, they didn't have that access. So it may be something as simple as having a printed out copy of your business continuity plan that says, here are the steps to take, here's the people to contact, here are the key people's cell phones and their Gmail or Yahoo email addresses so that you can continue to stay in contact, and really run that scenario of, well, what happens if we can't get to our mail system, or what happens if we can't get to our file system, or what happens if our phone system goes down? How are we going to communicate amongst ourselves, and how are we going to communicate with our constituents? And at any time as I'm going through this presentation, if you have any questions, feel free to chat them in, and then I'll take them as they come, and then we'll also have some QA time at the end. So I'm going to want to answer questions as they come up. Great. So now we'll talk a bit about developing a backup strategy. What are the components that we, and the processes that we go through whenever we are working with an organization to develop that backup strategy. And the first thing that I like to do is, has a complex name, assess your enterprise architecture. And that's basically, a fancy word for saying, follow the chain from, what function to what platform to what, hardware does that sit on. Especially now with a lot of services being out on the cloud, that idea gets abstracted out. So your file server may not be in your office, maybe somewhere else. Your email system may not be in your office, maybe somewhere else. But it's important to kind of know the entire chain for all those different systems. So it may be helpful just to start with that list. What system do we use for email? What is that system? Where does it live? What are the metrics around it? Files, program management, accounting, fundraising, your media system, your messaging system. These are all components for that are essential to your organization to function, and it's important to understand all of the unique recovery time and recovery points for all of them. There's a question about Dropbox, and I'll get to that. I have a special section just on some of the different solutions out there. So thanks for asking that question, and I'll get to it here in a bit. So I think this is kind of a fancier picture that really talks about doing that assessment. So for example, if you're an organization and you have an intranet, so that's the function. So your function is the intranet. There's a couple of applications that make the intranet work. So perhaps you have an IIS server, so that's a web server that has some information on it, and then maybe you have a SQL server that is also part of the intranet. Well, those applications are now on different platforms. So even though it's just the intranet, there's two different applications, and those are on two different servers, and that's physically on one piece of hardware. So looking at the chain, it means you need to have an assessment around each aspect of it. So maybe the functional level is the intranet. Hey, our intranet needs to be up all the time. Okay, well then that means that the IIS server and the SQL server need to be up all the time, which means server 1 and server 2 need to be up all the time, which means the hardware, the virtual host that those servers sit on, also needs to be up. So there's a lot of different components that go into it, and so if you can, diagram that out, or just think about all the different moving parts with the systems that you have in place, it can help you make those business decisions a lot easier. So this is, a sample matrix that that we use, where you can fill out, what's the function. This isn't as detailed as that diagram I had. What system, how much data is it? How are we backing it up? What's our recovery point? What's our recovery time if the server fails? What's our recovery time if the whole site fails? So if we have a power outage for a day or two, or there's a sprinkler goes off in the building and floods our server room. What's the recovery time? And then how long do we need to retain that information? So just filled it out. I think this can help just illuminate the the process and some of the different components. So in this case, let's say, hey, we've got our email system, it's Exchange, we're a big organization, we have 2 terabytes of data, we're backing it up to disk once a day, so our recovery point is 24 hours. If the whole system fails, we think we will be able to recover it in 2 days. If the whole site goes down, we're going to recover to some other location, and that's going to be 96 hours, and we need to retain our email for a year. And you can kind of go down through all these different systems, whether it's finance, that's maybe you're using Sage, and well, you're backing this up every 8 hours because there's a lot of information that gets changed. And then it's also important to look at the connectivity. What happens with your internet? So maybe you've got a redundant internet connection. You've got fiber and you've got cable, and maybe you don't just have one firewall, but you have 2 because your internet's really critical. And so if that firewall fails, you don't want to be down for a day or 2. And then I think it's also important to include these functions like, if your CRM, if you're using Salesforce, maybe you've decided that the built-in Salesforce backup process just doesn't work for you. It doesn't give you enough control, and you're using a third-party vendor to improve that RPO and RTO. So this, I think, is a framework that can help make those business decisions a little bit easier, because you can outline the different systems in place, the different requirements that each system has, and potentially if something is out of line, so email could never be down for a week, what needs to be changed? Do you need to invest in a clustered environment and multiple data centers if you're going to do it yourself, or maybe you're going to migrate to Office 365 because they're going to provide that 99.9% uptime, that SLA, where they say we'll guarantee that the system is not going to be down for more than 8 hours in the course of a year. So this is just one tool that you can use to help kind of document the systems and the associated processes around them. And that kind of brings us to the point of who makes the decision. And I would say that it's a business decision fundamentally. So while IT staff, myself, as a consultant, we can outline the cost-benefit analysis of various technical decisions. The business owners, the organizational owners, need to decide that requirement and budget for cost. You can have a very expensive and very effective solution that will mean very high uptime, but at the same time, that may not be the reality. I mean, maybe the reality is we need to trade off. We don't have a budget for uptime, so we're going to accept a lower uptime than we'd like to. But it's important, I think, to document and just have the discussion outside of the IT department, so that other organizations, the other departments, the board, has that involvement and understanding of, what is the impact, what is our approach, how are we going to manage all of this organizational data that we have, and continue operating and fulfilling our mission. Executive involvement is required. This is something that affects the running of the organization. And I would say, for your backup and your disaster recovery plan, I think that's something that, can probably be handled within the organization. But when we move into business continuity, that's typically something that involves not only the the IT systems, but it could also involve work policies. Where are people going to work if there's some major catastrophe or calamity? How's the organization going to continue to operate? And so that's going to be things beyond perhaps just the IT systems, but the policy of where people work and how they work and what are they going to have access to and how are you going to communicate to constituents and stakeholders. So, but I think IT is able to help frame those decisions to say, here are the options, here are the costs, and here's the process that you could go through. So if you're going to go through and make up that backup and disaster recovery checklist, so for the folks that were had no plan, this is a good place to get started. Understand your data and where it lives. Making that list of all the services or applications that you use can be really informative, and can help build that framework. Have a conversation about your organization's requirements. It could be once you know all your systems and you can realize, hey, our email's in-house, and if it really crashes, we're going to be down for a week. Are we okay with that? What should we change? What's our budget for making that transition? And then I think once you have those first two steps, then you can document and map out the backup plan. You can start with your current state, and then you can look at, hey, here's where we really need to be. We really can't be down for more than 8 hours for any of our critical systems, and that can influence the solutions that you choose to implement. It can help you decide how much money to invest in keeping those systems up and running. And then communicate and train staff. If it's great, the IT guy knows what's going on, but nobody else does, that doesn't really help out the organization in the event of a crisis. And then finally, test your plan and incorporate lessons learned. So as I highlighted in my first story about the organization that kind of said that they had that tolerance for a 3-day outage, but when the time came, found that it wasn't acceptable. I know it's you don't want to simply pull the plug in your mail server for 3 days to make sure that that's okay with people, but it is important to go through a testing process that kind of people understand the ramifications of their current system, and then also to incorporate those lessons learned, because invariably if you're backing up data, maybe you missed something, or you're backing up the database but not the front-end application, and so whenever you try to recover, there's a lot more work that goes into getting a system back up online. That kind of iterative testing can really help improve the process so that when you have a disaster for real, then you're able to handle it a lot better than kind of uncovering bugs in the system as you go. So I do want to talk a bit about our approach and kind of our evolution in how we've been managing backups for our clients. So in the field of backups, there is just kind of no shortage of backup solutions out there. Particularly on what I would call the file level backups, or these kind of entry level solutions that you see advertised all over the place. So Mozy, CrashPlan, Carbonite, iBackup, Spider Oak, SOS, SimForm. I mean, there are tons of solutions that are really geared towards what I would say the consumer. So if you need to back up your laptop at home, or your computers at home, they're really great for backing up files, pictures, getting that information off, so that whenever you drop your computer or spill Coke on it or whatever, you can download pictures and kind of be good to go. We have worked with a lot of these solutions, and I would say they're great if somebody has the time to kind of manage and take ownership of those solutions. So they're great if for yourself, you're at home, you can make sure that it's being backed up, data is being offloaded, and you've got your most recent copy running. But what we found is that in the organization, they tend to break pretty frequently, and those failures aren't often caught. So it's one of those things where you think it's kind of a set it and forget it approach, but then something happens, service stops running, or something changes, and all of a sudden the backups aren't running, and because somebody isn't checking on it every single day, you don't realize that it's not working until it's too late. And so unfortunately, there's been a lot of we've had a number of cases where organization has had one of these kind of basic backup plans in place, and it worked, and then we had to go recover some data, and it turned out that it hasn't been backing up for the last month, and the person that was supposed to be checking the backups, well, they moved on, and nobody took ownership of it. So so they're not, from my perspective, a great kind of enterprise-wide backup system, simply because they fail pretty frequently, and there's not really great reporting or monitoring of them built in. Me personally, I use something very similar to back up my own computer, and I kind of take ownership of that. I make sure that it's up to date and it's synced, and I do all that stuff. So if you're a small organization, that can be something that you can kind of take on for yourself. If you maintain an email system in-house, or you maintain a database system in-house, these will often not be great fits, because the amount of data that they're trying to back up is too large, and they're trying to upload it all over the internet, and so there's just a lot of failure points for kind of getting that initial backup, and then there's often a real challenge in getting the data to kind of back down onto your network. So in the case if you're just backing up files, and your system crashes, you can download the files that you need and be ready to go. But if you're backing up a database for your organization, you're backing up maybe, the worst is your email system. If your email system crashes and you have to try to fix it with one of these solutions, it's just really difficult, because you have to download or work with a consumer-grade product to try to get them to send you data on a disk, and it can be a very lengthy process. So if you're a small organization backing up files, hey, there's no shortage out there. You can read the reviews to figure out which one's the best for you. My opinion is they're all basically the same, and as long as you're on top of it, they're going to be just fine. For the larger organizations, you're probably using something like Symantec or Acronis, or maybe Microsoft's Data Protection Manager. Those are software, backup software that's been around for a while and has a lot of control and a lot of good reporting. Or perhaps you're using a backup appliance like from 3X or Barracuda, where it's a physical device that has some backup agents, and it's backing up data on the device locally, and then maybe sending it off-site. These solutions are very powerful and very robust, and they can help you meet a lot of those recovery point and recovery time objectives, because you can back up data kind of multiple times throughout the day, or you can, Symantec, and Acronis, you can back up full system images, so that if a server crashed, you can just restore the image, as opposed to reinstalling the operating system and reinstalling the applications and reinstalling, and then recovering data. So that's kind of in the enterprise here. And then there's a new category of what I would call SaaS backups, or software as a service backups. So recognizing that a lot of these software services don't have really great or robust or really regular backup systems. So there's a number of providers like Cloud Ally, LiveOffice, or Backupify, and even Amazon, where you can back up your Google Apps system, you can back up Salesforce, you can back up Office 365 into a different platform, so that if you need to go recover that email that somebody deleted 30 days ago, or if you need to recover those emails that that departed staff member just trashed, you can go back and get those. So I think that's the new area for really growth in the the market, is that not only is as systems move from off the client kind of network onto the cloud, those systems still need to be managed, maintained, and backed up. And so there's a crop of new solutions that are out there that can help you handle that. So we've used, like I said, a number of these backup solutions and support a number of these backup solutions, but we found that there's been some gaps in terms of what they provide, and I think what clients and organizations really need. The first thing is flexible backups, so the ability to to have the backups run and not have to be kind of continuously monitoring and managing them. And that would also say flexible backups, meaning we're not just backing up servers anymore, but we need to look to back up people's desktop computers, people's laptop computers, and more people's tablets and phones, since organizational information is on there. And so it's a real loss if somebody loses their tablet that has all the the notes that they were taking, or contact information. So I think that's going to be a growing area, is that just the ability to back up multiple platforms and recognizing that all the data isn't on the server in your closet anymore. Again, configurable retention. So if an organization needs to keep data for for 30 days or for 60 days or for a year, how can those retention policies be be set? And or the converse, if your organization you only need to keep email 30 days, and after that you need to get rid of it. Being able to have a system that can really handle that flexibility. We've used for actually about the past 3 or 4 years a fully managed and integrated backup solution. It's been great to recover, to have that really tight recovery time and recovery point. But it's limited to a 30-day retention period, which isn't long enough for a lot of our clients. So so we're looking at something that's going to be able to have a retention period of 30 days, 1 month, a year, 7 years, to meet those business requirements. And then I think the keys are that secure and encrypted cloud storage. Particularly if you're a larger organization, you maintain your servers in your office, you really need to get that data off-site, so that if something happens to your main office, you have data in another location. That data also needs to be encrypted, so that if there's a data loss or data breach, they're not going to get access to your data. So that's why we've actually invested in building up our own cloud, and we'll have the ability to securely host encrypted data on on our network, so that we don't have to go to the public cloud, so to speak, and have data that's on an Amazon environment or Google Apps environment. We can really control the chain from your network into our data center, and make sure that it doesn't go anywhere other than that. And then finally, I think the real key that we're looking at in our next generation solution is just this. It's a big term, warm spare disaster recovery site. But essentially what it means is that in the event that your system fails, what's the recovery time? So even if you're a small organization, you just have one server. If that server fails, hard drive crashes, it's still going to be potentially a week until you can get new hardware, restore the data, even in a good scenario. So what clients have done in the past is they've invested either in a fully redundant system, built their own data center, and built that capacity, or they've bought additional servers to kind of be there just in case something happens. And it's a big cost, but at the same time, if something you did lose a server, being down for a week is not acceptable. So one of the things that we're aiming to provide is the ability for the clients where we manage the backups and the data is in our data center, is the ability to restore that server in our secure cloud, so that you can continue to operate, and you don't have to make that big upfront investment, because we're essentially going to be sharing I think sharing that risk amongst all of our clients. So I'm really excited about that, because I think it's a great opportunity for our clients to really benefit from the fact that we work with over 120 organizations. And so instead of making that big investment up front in a whole failover environment for something that you're likely not going to use, you can leverage the the networkless city and take advantage of our of our capacity. So that's something that I'm really excited about in our next generation platform that we're currently in final stages of testing. So I do have a few questions, and so please chat those in. We still have a couple minutes left. So just wanted to highlight some trends. So I think more, as I mentioned, more and more services in the cloud. I think definitely more bring your own device. There's a great configuration of work devices, office devices, personal devices. Everything is kind of blending together. And along with that, data sprawl. It's not just oh, the files are on the file server. Now it's, oh, well, the files are on the file server. They're in Google Apps. They're in Dropbox, and oh, they're also in Basecamp because somebody has that set up. So I think that's a real challenge. And then finally, I think digital asset management also presents a challenge because as we move from pictures to video, needing to store and manage and catalog and retain that information is a big challenge because it's not just storing a couple of Word documents and backing that up. It's storing videos, which could if your video production person is doing their job, they should be generating a terabyte of content a month, and that's just a massive amount of data to deal with. So I think those are some of the trends that are really going to be coming to the fore here in the coming year. So let's. One of the questions was about does Dropbox offer automatic backups, and then for a smaller org, is the software as a solution affordable? So I would say, so Dropbox and kind of other similar solutions like Box, where they kind of do some synchronization and replication, I like them in that I think they're good for either your backup solution or your file sharing solution, but not both, because we've had some situations where particularly with Dropbox, is where if it was used for both things, and one copy got out of sync, then whenever it got back in sync, it actually overwrote kind of the old changes. And so I'm a little leery of using Dropbox for both my backup system and my file sharing system because of that. So I like to have to know what I'm using for my backup system, and I like to have a know what I'm using for my file collaboration system. So and then in terms of the software, software as a service backups, I think each have different prices. All of this is kind of on the per user per month basis. So I think Cloud Ally is one of them, and I think their backup, it's like $3 or $4 per user per month for backing up the Google Google accounts. So if you're able to get Google Apps at a discount, or free, there's no monetary cost. I mean, there's your time, obviously, but I think it's worth investing in a solution, to do that backup and recovery automatically. Google also has actually it's called Google Takeout, and I think I have a link to it at the end. But you can actually manually go into Google Apps and actually get an export of your data, and you can do that on a regular basis manually, just going into the system and getting data out. I think Google's done a good job of providing a great platform and making their data portable so that you can get your data out. And I think the differentiator is if you're what's your time worth? Is it are you able or willing to have a regular weekly or monthly kind of manual backup process, or do you want to spend a few dollars a month per user to have an automatic backup system in place that's going to sync that data and keep it in another system, so that if something happens, Google goes down, or somebody deletes a bunch of files, that you have it in another location. I just have a few more slides, and so if there's any additional questions, I'd be happy to take them. But I think the key takeaways, just want to make sure that folks we reiterate that. I think the great place to start is developing that enterprise architecture, understanding all of the different systems that are in place and how they're interconnected. The intranet example where it's not just the intranet, it's the web server, it's the database server, it's the physical server, it's the virtual server that they all sit on. And it's important to understand that architecture, understand that recovery point and recovery time objectives. 8 hours of downtime, a week of downtime. What's the risk tolerance there? Also understanding that out of sight doesn't equal out of mind. This link is basically Google saying the Google document that says, hey, if you permanently delete something, it's gone. It's a tough lesson to learn, but if you know that going in, that can help you make better decisions about managing your data and backing up the data. And then, I think the old lesson is you're only as good as your last restore. So with any of these solutions, you hope that they're just kind of working and chugging away in the background, but you don't know until you do a test. So if your organizational requirement may be, hey, every day we need to do a test backup to make sure that that succeeded, or every week we need to do that. Maybe every month we need to test full system recovery. These are all reasonable expectations, and it's just it often gets pushed to the bottom because it's not a crisis at the time. But if you're able to do regular tests of individual files or monthly tests of systems, whenever that crisis day does come, you're going to be in a lot better position to come out of it on the other side. The link there will have the link to the Google document. So, are there any other questions as we wrap up? And all right. So I'm going to go switch this over to Roshni, and she's going to talk a little bit about our upcoming webinar. So we're going to be doing on April 25th, Best of N10, so the aha moments from the N10 conference. I'll be presenting along with my colleague Johan Hammerstrom. So the N10 conference is upcoming the second week in April. So I'd encourage you, if you haven't registered, to take advantage of that. It's a great community. There's lots of great learning and sharing that goes on. Johan's going to be actually leading a session on IT trends. I think it's going to be really exciting, really interactive. I think the real benefit of N10 is the presenters are great, but it's often more informative, to find out what other organizations are doing. So Johan's leading a session on IT trends, and I will be leading a session on IT governance. So while I think the title of my session is Boring Name, Big Impact. So it's we don't often think about IT governance or until it's too late, or so I'll be talking about that again. Hopefully, getting some good discussion and sharing some examples for different types of organizations. What works well, how are organizations running effectively. So if there's any other questions, feel free to chat them in. Again, you can connect with us on Twitter or send me an email. And this webinar will be has been recorded and will be shared with everyone afterwards. So if there's any follow-up, please let me know. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate all the time and attention, and hopefully we'll get to chat with you in April for our next session. All right, have a great day.